Hello, and welcome to another episode of Common Sense with Dr. Ben Carson. I'm your host, Ben Carson. And my guest this week is a very busy man. I'm so thankful that he was able to take a little bit of time out of his schedule to sit down and talk with us. He's a comedian, actor, writer, director, podcaster, husband, father, grandfather, and now I hear he's coming out with a new book, so add author to that list. I'd like to welcome Rob Schneider. Rob, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Doctor. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
You've had a long list of film and TV credits and touring, and I'm interested because I picture you as a very precocious kid. Did you get in a lot of trouble for cracking jokes and talking all the time in school?
I think it's for not paying attention more than anything else. I think I was bored. I think being the youngest child, I think that's what happens. When you're the youngest,
Yeah.
no one's giving you enough attention. You're going to go somewhere else to get it. I think that's what happened.
Well, it worked. Now, you were on Saturday Night Live, the comedy team from 1980 until 1994. Was Saturday Night Live always so political when it first
Well, I
started?
mean, they were always leaning left, Doctor. They weren't, I wouldn't say they were so strident. I think they got a little bit, but that happens. Also, I think, I don't know if people paid as close attention to it as they do now, just because, whatever's on the internet stays forever. But I don't think any particular aspect of society was immune from becoming polarized politically. And I think it just kind of happened. It's like, I don't know, there's something about how Trump, President Donald Trump, affected people in some ways where they seem to, if you were a particular political ideology, it seemed to affect their ability to reason. And some people abandoned reason. And it kind of reminds me of like in the NFL, the NFL, you get a hit and a football hit,
Yeah.
and they go, oh, let's check this guy out. They take him to the blue tent. So I think in a way, a lot of liberals got taken to the blue tent.
That's a good way to put it. Well, hosts like Jon Stewart, John Oliver, sort of blur the lines between news and satire.
Yeah, but I don't think you can compare the two of them. I think Jon Stewart is particularly, he brings people to your point of view. And I think also Jon Stewart is reasonable, and he is logical and rational, and I think persuasive. So I think the reason why Jon Stewart is so, brilliant is because he's eloquent and able to articulate his point of view and bring people to a more reasonable place. And that's why I think that he was so effective and also so good and also entertainment, is entertaining. Whereas I don't believe that John Oliver is anywhere near that category. I think John Oliver just spews the party line, and you can just replace his, you can just, his stuff is like just liberal talking points that are not well conceived or thought out or logical or rational. It's a regurgitation. So I don't find that comparison to be. I don't think you should group those two together, in my opinion.
Well, you've had somewhat of a political conversion. Would you say your views changed, or was it the political parties that changed?
Both. I think. I think when you're younger, there's just I've talked to Jimmy Dore about this. You just you accept, or you find yourself in that, especially from California, in the liberal intelligentsia, and you don't feel like you have to. Why would you leave that? But what happens is, though, is the Democratic Party is very interesting because they really do their best work to help people when they have no power. So in other words, when they don't do anything, because when they're in power, they don't do anything to help people. So that's what I found to be particularly egregious. And at the same time, being from California, seeing the a very strange events happening. I would say around 2013 was big. I'm sure maybe it was before that where I became aware of it, where you really had the Democratic Party being authoritarian and pro censorship and wanting to silence people and censor people and demonize people. And I found that to be very strange because it really they took over where what was happening in the early 80s under the Reagan administration. And the Democrats have taken it much farther. And then they've had more tools at their disposal, being in the liberal tech companies. And so you had things like the moral majority and Jerry Falwell. And so that was a way of silencing or trying to kind of minimize and slow things down. And but it's not anywhere near as crazy as the illiberal liberals have gone in the last few years. So I think it's not as much my conversion as to realizing that there really is an attack on free speech, and that's coming from the left this time.
But when you express such views in Hollywood, what kind of reaction did you get from Hollywood colleagues? And
what do you think? What do you think?
I suspect it wasn't very pleasant.
Well, I mean, the thing about comedians, the good ones, is you have to attack positions of power, and the positions of power were just happened to be, I mean, was the Democrats and liberals, and they don't take it as well. They don't have a sense of humor about it. They really don't. They kind of, it's like there's some sort of regression that happens where you can't take it. So there's some jokes that I made, like when Hillary Clinton lost, I tweeted out after she lost to Donald Trump in the presidential race in 2016, I said, I haven't seen the Democrats this angry since we freed the slaves. Anyway, that did not go down in Hollywood as good as you could imagine.
I can very, very well imagine. Well, did it cost you anything? Did you get canceled?
I would say, because they asked me on Fox News, have you lost friends? I mean, how boring would it be to have friends who only agree with you, and you can't discuss things and argue? So no, wouldn't say I lost friends. I would say maybe I've lost opportunities. But how many great movies are they making these days? I mean, for every Oppenheimer, how many other ones are just forgettable? So I don't. I guess, if you're asking, have you lost money? I mean, probably. But how much? What's our higher list of things than money in our society, in our culture? And I would put freedom pretty high up there. And I would not want to give up my freedom for anything. And I think that, like my friend Robert Kennedy Jr. says, he said during the pandemic, during the scamdemic, as I call it, he said there are things worse than death. And certainly giving up your freedoms and seeing the freedoms that you enjoyed being diminished, for your children, that seems to be something worth fighting for. And whatever you lose, I think, there's a very similar blacklisting that happened in the 1950s that I think is happening again. But it's just Hollywood's susceptible to it, and it doesn't bother me.
And we're back with Common Sense. As I always say, common sense isn't common anymore. But our guest today, Rob Schneider, demonstrates that even in Hollywood, there are people with common sense.
Well, Doctor, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was very impressed with you. We were all, for people in the medical freedom movement, who saw the potentiality of what could happen to not just individuals and not just to, America, but to the world. What can happen if the pharmaceutical industry continues to grow and align themselves, and who have aligned themselves with the regulatory boards and the revolving door there, to eventually what happened was shutting down the world. How did you? Because you were more open-minded to and admitting the things that you know, are not allowed to be thought of. In other words, things like vaccine injury and the culpability, the lack of the pharmaceutical industries and the protections that they get so uniquely more than any other industry. So, I mean, because I thought you put yourself out there more than
Yeah.
anybody else on that stage, and more than other people in the profession. Did you get backlash for that, or how did you get and where do you feel about it now?
Well, I was disappointed with the medical associations for just sort of tucking their tails and following their masters rather than doing what they knew was right
Yeah.
and not following real science. They knew that natural immunity was effective, but they went along with the narrative that no, natural immunity only lasts for like 3 weeks or something. What a bunch of garbage.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to see that some of them really did start waking up and being a little more forceful. But I didn't get a whole lot of blowback because they knew I was right.
Yeah.
So that was not really a big issue for me.
That's
But
good.
but I've never been one who sort of has my finger up in the air, seeing which way the wind is blowing. I think you just got to do what's right.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, you know, why are so many people leaving California? Elon Musk, Adam Carolla, Joe Rogan, Jeff Bezos is leaving Washington and going to Florida. What's the deal?
Well, I think even if you have money and you have the ability for freedom, whatever, you just after a while, California, and it just beats you down. Um you have these blue cities democratically run, and they're running to the ground. They really are. I mean, you have like, and I'll just give you like what I've told this before, but like in San Francisco, I had to pay $25,000 to remove what the city called toilets in front of my house. You know those beautiful San Francisco streets with their flowers? Well, those are
Mm.
flower pots that were turned into toilets. And the city did no longer call them flower pots. They called them toilets. So it's just at a certain point, instead of getting rid of the crazy people, which they were able to do, and when I say crazy, I mean homeless. Well, that was another thing that you got to blame the Republicans for, because I do think the Reagan administration in California decided to close all the mental health facilities, which
No,
really
no,
kind of started the homeless thing. And that was before drugs became
no.
rampant, before crack and crystal meth kind of opened the gate to really inexpensive drugs that people could take and ruin their lives. And now we have fentanyl, which is, killing tens of thousands, 65,000 a year. It's an estimate. So you have the cities that won't do, like they'll clean it up when Gavin Newsom will clean it up when the premier of China comes, but he won't do it for the people that have to live in that community and work in that community. So it's disappointing, and at a certain point, it's exhausting, because you think that, like the migrants that beat up those two police officers in New York City, you would think like that's going to get people angry to make a change, but it doesn't. People just don't. That doesn't wake people up to do anything. And so at a certain point, you just get, tired of it. And no matter what, whether you're Elon Musk, you want to get the hell out of there. I'm tired. I'm tired. There's not one aspect of your life that the Democrats don't want to get involved in, from like the stove that you cook, the car that you drive. It's just, the schools, what they, and for them to say, hey, you can't tell us what to teach your kid. It's like, yes, I can.
They're sort of like the jihadists. They believe themselves to be righteous and everybody else to be an infidel, and that they know
Yes,
what's
you're right.
everybody.
Well, there is as my friend Professor Peter Boghossian says, there is a religious architecture in their thinking. So absolutely, the difference between as a good friend, you might want to read this from my good friend Andrew Doyle. He's got a great book called the New Patriarchy, or the New Victorians. It's the New Puritans. Sorry, by Andrew Doyle. And he explains the difference between and compares a lot of the the Salem witch trials and with the woke and their canceling, which is a new kind of, and I think President Trump would agree, this new kind of witch trials. But there is a difference, though, Doctor. And as a Christian man, you would agree with this. The difference was, even in Salem, the judges who were killing witches and putting stones and weighting down people to their death, even they did not consider themselves above anyone and righteous. They considered themselves sinners and below the righteousness of the Lord. And that's different between these new puritanical woke people. They consider themselves, like you said, above other people and righteous. And that is a real interesting distinction, I find.
Well, I want to ask you before we close about your new book, You Can Do It. What's it about, and why did you write it?
Well, I was asked by people to start, talking more about free speech. And then, as a college dropout, which was good at the end of the day, because I don't feel I was completely indoctrinated into any particular point of view or any particular political ideology. Though, if you question the illiberal ideology of today, you are automatically considered a right winger. So
Exactly.
I don't consider myself that. No, so I wanted to write a book on free speech and how important it is, and how it is being attacked and undermined, and what is at. I mean, so I've been a lot of research and finding finding what is at the core of the attack on free speech, and so I would say it's an edutainment. I mean, I try to make it as funny as I can. People expect that, they expect you to be serious, Doctor. They expect me to be funny. So I'm trying to use humor, like most of the good comedians out there. All of the good comedians, you want to use humor to bring people to a more reasonable or reasoned position. And I'm doing that. And also at the same time, discussing some of these things. And I'm finding some of the similarities between what the government has done before in silencing and demeaning people and trying to destroy people, whether it's Martin Luther King with the FBI, that incredible letter that I reread recently, where they were trying to destroy him and getting Dr. King to kill himself. It was just you realize that, like, the 1,000 boxes that are still unreleased by the Biden administration on the Kennedy assassination, why would they not want to release that? And I think if you had to take a guess, you would have to say, well, it's perhaps because they can't let the people of the United States know that elements within our own government took down the president of the freest country in the history of the world, and that that structure and the same ideology is still there. And so that's something that we need to discuss, because I think we have a shrinking of freedoms in America, and the attack on free speech is ongoing.
And political correctness has been extremely destructive. I spoke at the Presidential Prayer Breakfast in 1997, 27 years ago. And of course, the more recent time was in 2013. But I talked that time about political correctness and how it was going to grow and become a real problem for our society if we didn't get it under control. And we didn't get it under control. And now it's morphed into wokeness and a bunch of monstrous things that are impacting exactly what you're talking about.
Well, it is, but I think it is by design. It's not something that was just. It's been in universities for a long time, and in academia, it doesn't really matter because it's a insular society, and it really doesn't have an impact on bigger society, or I should say, larger society. So, but it has escaped, and now it's all over social media. It's in politics, and it's creeping its way now into the courts, which is very, very dangerous. But it is by design. And if you look at like the French intellectuals, Foucault, and the ones who realized in the 1960s that the revolution of the workers didn't work or wasn't going to happen because the workers realized that capitalism works. If you work hard, especially in America, you're going to do better, and your children are going to do better. And so that kind of Marxist corruption needed to happen somewhere else, in a more in a place where it can grow and flourish, and that was the academics and academia. So that's what we've seen, and that's my understanding of it.
Well, from our short conversation, I can tell you're very well read. And I wish more people in the entertainment arena would avail themselves of a lot of materials, because a lot of the things that we see happening now are things that have happened time and time again, but people don't know. If you don't know about them, you're going to repeat the same silly things all over.
Well, there's a couple of things that kind of take pressure off too, Doctor. If you read Jeff Deist, Deist, he's from the Mises Institute, or was. You can see that some of the problems that we're having now are pretty similar to what we've gone in the mid-19th century. So we're always going to have these. It does seem, because we're living in the age like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. But it's always something. If it wasn't this, it would be that. But it is important that the foundational principles of our country can continue to allow us to have a real debate and not be silenced, and not, which was the most incredible thing to me that happened, was for anyone who is even has any interest or any education at all will notice that civics was taken out of schools. And so we don't teach our own people how government works. Right. And so that's not a coincidence that during this pandemic, they were able to shut down liberties. In our Constitution and Bill of Rights, there's no exemption. There's no, well, you have all these rights. You have the right to assemble, to petition your government for grievances, free speech, but unless there's a really bad flu,
right,
then you're out.
It is very interesting. And if you look back at the founders, when they were putting together our Constitution, they studied every government that ever existed.
Yeah, Madison.
They were eclectics, and they took the good stuff and left the bad stuff out. But one of the things they recognized is that no matter how governments start off, they all end up the same way. They grow, they infiltrate, and they dominate. And they wanted to give us something that would keep that from happening. But it's up to us, the citizens, to know what our rights are, to know what our Constitution says, and to get representatives that actually understand that. Yes,
and that's why we're going to have to eventually do term limits. The biggest threat that's happened was, of course, after 9/11, which is the spying on our own people, which was the Patriot Act. And more importantly than just spying on our own people, to me, the biggest impact was the abdication of Congress to the executive, which is Congress must legislate, must be the governing body that declares wars. And this abdication and this re-up of the Patriot Act continues to give too much power to the executive. So we have, and we need to start calling our executive what this is. We have a emperor. Our form of government now is no longer the three-legged milk stool of the judicial, the legislative, and the executive. We now have a emperor who's able to just do things at will. I mean, I believe Congress needs to, and a president, which is the greatest gift that Washington gave to this country besides the country, was to walk away from power and to ask for less power and give power back to the people. So that has to happen again. We need to be able to have, I think it should be like football. You should get 2 executive orders a year, and you got to wait. You got to throw the red flag, and I'm going to put an executive order. You can't do like what Biden did, 160 the first day in office, or the first week. It's just, it is the executive is not designed. It was never part of the founding principles of our country for the executive to make laws, and that is what's happening. And the problem is the Republicans like it too.
Yes.
They don't want to get rid of it. They like it just as much as the Democrats, because they won't change it because they're waiting for their guy to get back in, whoever that guy is.
Absolutely. Wise words indeed. And where can people get your book, and when can we expect that?
Well, that's coming out September. It's through Hatchet Press, and that's September 24th is the release, just in time for the election.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, so it's going to be interesting. I mean, like I said, I'm trying to keep more researched edutainment.
I like it.
So we'll make it kind of fun and light, but at the same time, I want to cover a lot of these things because I think it's like, it doesn't take much more than a generation to lose a lot. And I considered myself like one of the dummies where I grew up, and yet I just don't find enough people interested or knowledgeable about, or I should say not knowledgeable, but interested in gaining more knowledge on particular subjects, especially how their government and what's happening to their society that they're living in. So I think it's important to keep that up. And I hope your listeners, there's some good books, Douglas Murray, The Madness of Crowds, Andrew Doyle, The New Puritans. I think you could look at that. And hopefully, there's my dog. And then my book will be, hey, come on, Mia. Speak Your Mind, America. You can do it. Speak Your Mind, America, coming out September 24th.
Wonderful. And thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your courage. I know.
Well, thank you.
No.
Well, you were an inspiration to me. That's why I jumped on here. I really was proud. I was very, very happy that you were talking about the fact that there are no drugs at the presidential debate when other people weren't comfortable saying it. That, vaccines, because we have to, if we're going to care about our kids, we're going to have to really do something about them. And the fact that there's no drug that's 100% safe 100% of the time for 100% of the people. And we need to care more about children and the fact that there's 54% of them have chronic illness now. And that's more important than the bottom line of the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, well, that's a topic I could talk about for a long time.
Well, thank you so much. All the best. We'll do this again, okay?
We definitely do it again. I hope you all enjoyed that conversation with Rob Schneider. He has a lot of common sense. And our common sense prescription for this week is Proverbs 17:22. It says, a cheerful heart is a good medicine. And the Bible's right on that one. Laughter, it's healthy and it's contagious. It's good to be around happy people. And, try to seek out some of your friends that make you laugh and make them laugh. Dig up some of those old funny movies that make you smile. Tell your wife or your husband a joke. It's good for the heart. For instance, why are piggy banks so wise? Because they're filled with common sense. CENTS. Hey, isn't that cool? Thanks again for listening. And that's it for this week. Make sure you subscribe for free. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts from. Don't miss an episode. Tell your friends, review us, rate us, and spread common sense, because that's what's going to save us. Our common sense, just intelligence, using our brains, not being like sheep led to the slaughter. And until next week, make sure you remember the cornerstones: faith, liberty, community, and life. See you next week.